I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania, Newtown. My mother's side of the family was Quaker. They came over in 16 something and settled in Valley Forge and then later moved to Bucks County, Pennsylvania, full of Quakers. I went to a Quaker elementary school, then public elementary school, then public junior high, then private Quaker high school. And then I went to a Quaker college, Wilmington College. They had a huge agricultural studies department. The Quakers and the Aggies didn't get along very well. The Aggies were in favor of the Vietnam War, and the Quakers were pacifists and against the Vietnam War. I was a Quaker pacifist. So I graduated from Wilmington in 1969. My boyfriend did not want to get drafted and sent to Vietnam. I applied to various graduate schools in English literature because I minored in art, but I wasn't bold enough to consider myself to be an artist at this time. So I got accepted at Dalhousie University, which is literally across the street from the Nova Scotia College of Art and Design in Halifax. Gary was new. He was a brand new president, and he was massively overhauling the school so it didn't look like any art school you've ever seen before. The kids at the art college were just way cooler than the kids in the English department. So I would go to David Askevold's projects classes when Dan Graham came to town and started doing filming on the Citadel of Halifax, or Doug Hubler, and I audited Dennis Young's art history classes. Dennis helped me to title a class that I started teaching. It was Literary Parallels to Modern Art. So you could understand, you could look at the literature and understand because of your familiarity with Cubism. The conceptual artists of the day were coming through the school, and I discovered, oh my God, art can be made out of language. And the artists of the day were also permutating everything. So I wanted to do a piece about permutating breast forms. It's a piece called Breast Forms Permutated, which I did in 1972. It was my first work of visual art. And I took photographs of boobs in the English department and boobs in the art college. This was before feminism brought us to the realization that we are all in this together and we are one community. The women were competitive with each other, not supportive of each other. When I moved to New York in 1974, I was pretty sure that the women in New York were going to eat me alive, and it was completely the opposite. One woman artist, a little older than I am, Judy Stein, took me under her wing and took me to different consciousness raising groups so I could pick the one that I liked the best. She was a visiting critic. She looked at what I was doing and said, yeah, this is art. There are other women around North America and Europe who are doing this concept-based feminist art. She put Breast Forms Permutated actually into a show called Circa 7500, which was one of her number shows. She started shows in cities and the number was the population of the city. It started at Cal Arts. Every artist got a single card front and back to use as their art space. Through this catalog, I met artists who were living in New York whose work was going in the same direction that mine was in the exploration of identity. Jackie Apple was paramount among those artists. So I wrote to Jackie and she invited me to come to New York and visit her. And then we did a collaborative work together in December of 1973. We invented a feminist. We took the feminist we invented and all 6 of Jackie's friends in New York out to lunch at the Plaza Hotel. We told the photographers, we had 2 photographers, to just say yes to anything that was projected on us. If people said, is that Vogue magazine having lunch? Then we wanted the photographer to say yes. So then we got into the limo and went down to Soho. You're not allowed to take pictures in a gallery. So they were very unhappy about that right away. And then they noticed that we were taking pictures of ourselves and not of the art. So they were downright annoyed. So we got thrown out of Sonnabend. We went to various galleries and basically were invited not to return. This whole experience would not have been possible had not Lucy Lepard said, yes, you are an artist, and yes, there are other women doing concept-based feminist work like you are. The way it worked was the class would have a guest artist who wanted to do a project. Dan Graham had a female student and a male student using video cameras or maybe they were film. I think they were film, but in completely opposite ways. The female student was running the camera facing out over her body. So you see the landscape moving wildly around as she's trying to cover every inch of her body, going around and around. Meanwhile, the male student is doing the opposite. I think he's pointing the camera at himself. So you still get the landscape, but you see the image of the student smack in the middle. And the piece in its final form consists of both films playing at the same time. So you have literally two perspectives on one piece of famous real estate in Halifax, the Citadel, where you can see the whole harbor. Vito Acanci came to town for, I think, a month residency. So you got to spend real time with a practicing artist. Vito was kind enough to look at my work, and he recommended I read Irving Goffman's Presentation of Self in Everyday Life. The idea is that we are all performing all the time. This experience of sitting in on Vito's class gave me permission to continue my use of my own female body as my art instrument and to see my own individual perspective as of value. The other thing that Vito did that changed my life was he took sexuality to be a legitimate subject of contemporary art. Nobody else was doing this, but he was masturbating under a platform at Sonnebenn Gallery in 1971. It blew the doors off of my world to see that my own sexual being could be the instrument that I used to make my work. I do remember driving with Richards, we're in New York now, and wanting to start a gallery. And he said, "What are you going to call it?" And I said, "I don't know, Martha Wilson Gallery." And he said, that's very self-centered. It made me realize I don't want it to be about me at all. I want it to be about this new community that I had found and a downtown scene that was in truth not being recognized as of value by the uptown institutions, the Museum of Modern Art, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Whitney, the Guggenheim. There were some steps being made to tiptoe toward the notion of artist books. For example, Whitney started a publishing program, but they were livre de luxe. They were not the cheap shit that artists were producing and trading among themselves. I took my cheap shit up to the Museum of Modern Art. I said to the people in the bookstore, "You know that this kind of work is valuable. Why don't you sell my work?" They said, "No, lady, your book costs $5, but it would cost us $5 to do the bookkeeping for this work. So we're not going to handle your work." I thought, fine, I'll handle the work. I had a roommate. We split the rent for the ground floor of 112 Franklin Street. So I thought, oh, it's obviously a bookstore. We have to just live in the back, show the books in the front. A friend of mine who shall remain nameless basically stole a set of mailing labels. And I sent this letter out to the whole art world saying, "I bet you have these books under your bed. You don't know what to do with them. I'm going to sell them and make them available to the public and then preserve them for posterity." We got 200 submissions by opening day, which was April 3rd. We just had our 44th birthday. We put all the books out on the trestle tables. Lucy Lepard came to the opening. Willoughby Sharp, founder of Avalanche magazine, was also founder of the Franklin Street Arts Center. We started having building meetings. If Willoughby didn't get his way at the building meeting, he would just yell louder, longer. And I thought to myself, I'm going to incorporate it as a separate not-for-profit organization. Plus, Franklin Street, it's downtown. So I was able to walk around Lower Manhattan and incorporate Franklin without paying attorney fees. Richards and I split up before I left Halifax, and he is such a great guy. He gave me a check for $5,000 representing my sweat equity in the building that he and his family had bought, but I had contributed to by working, by stripping paint off the baseboards, that kind of thing. So I had this chunk of change that enabled me to buy a vacuum cleaner, install a hot water heater, install all the stuff you need to live. So we can thank Richard Jardin for helping me to establish Franklin Furnace.